Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Prepper. I'm Bellum. Today we are working on the Strong Foundation series where we read through the Bible. When last we left off, we saw Joseph's brothers sell Joseph into slavery. I don't like slavery at all, for numerous reasons. Humans should never own another human. But that's a topic for a different time. So, if everyone would get out their Bibles, and I prefer you all to read along. Don't just allow me to do all the work for you. Alright. Genesis 39. And Joseph had been taken down to Mitzrayim, that's Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, a Mitzrayite, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. And it came to be that Yahweh was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man, and was in the house of his master, the Mitzrayite. Now that's actually not very common. That usually when someone would first get a slave, the slave would be thrown into would be put out in the fields, set to hard labor. He wouldn't be in the house. This shows how much skill and how good Joseph actually turned out to be. And his master saw that Yahweh was with him, and that Yahweh made all he did prosper in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his eyes, and served him. And he appointed him over his house, and gave into his hands all that he had. And it came to be, from the time that he appointed him over his house, and all that he had, that Yahweh blessed the Mitzrayite's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of Yahweh was on all that he had in the house and in the field. God made them prosper. And he left in Joseph's hands all he had. And he did not know what he had except for the bread which he ate. And Joseph was handsome in form and handsome in appearance. Basically saying Joseph was in control of everything except the food that his master chose to eat. Which is actually a really good, big honor for Joseph. And then it goes on to say he looked really nice. He was... Basically, he looked like what we would think of as a supermodel. He was really pleasing to the eye. He was well proportioned. He looked great, I guess. And after these events, it came to be that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not know what is with me in the house, and he has given into my hand all that he has." Basically, he's saying, I'm not going to betray my master's trust. "No one is greater in this house than I, and he has not withheld whatever from me but you, because you are his wife, and you, well, and you are his wife. And how shall I do this great evil and sin against Elohim? And it came to be, as she spoke to Joseph day by day, that he did not listen to her to lie with her, to be with her. And it came to be, on a certain day, when Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was inside, that she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. But he left his garment in her hand and fled and ran outside. And it came to be, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and fled outside, that she called to the men of her house and spoke to them, saying, See, he has brought into us a Hebrew to mock us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And it came to be, when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled and went outside. It seems to me like Joseph is one of the earliest records of being persecuted under the Me Too movement here. It is obvious from the text that Joseph did nothing wrong, but she wanted to punish him. This happens quite a bit nowadays. Anyway, let's continue. And she kept his garment with her until his master came home. And she spoke to him these same words, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came to me to mock me. So it came to be, as I lifted my voice and cried out, that he left his garment with me and fled outside. And it came to be, with his master, when his master heard the words which his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did to me according to these words, that his displeasure burned. He was pissed. He believed his wife and was pissed. When Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the sovereign's prisoners were confined, and he was there in the prison. But Yahweh was with Joseph and extended loving commitment to him, and he gave him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So God put him high in standing with the warden. And the prison warden gave him into the hands of Joseph all the prisoners who were in the prison, and whatever was done there was his doing. He put him in charge of everybody, all the prisoners. That is an amazing promotion from simple prisoner to basically captain of the prison guards. The prison warden did not look into any point that was under Joseph's hand, because Yahweh was with him. And whatever he did, Yahweh made it prosper. Genesis 40. And after these events it came to be that the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mitzrayim, the Pharaoh, sinned against their master, the sovereign of Mitzrayim, And Pharaoh was wroth with his 2 officers, and the chief cupbearer and chief baker. So he put them in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, the place where Joseph was a prisoner. And the captain of the guard put Joseph in charge of them, and he served them, so that they were in confinement for some time. Then the cupbearer and the baker of the sovereign of Mitzrayim, who were confined in the prison, dreamed a dream, both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came to them in the morning, and looked at them, and saw that they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in confinement of his master's house, saying, "Why did you look so sad today?" And they said to him, "We each have dreamed a dream, and there is no one to interpret it." And Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to Elohim? Relate them to me, please." Basically, Joseph asked them what was wrong. They said, "We had some bad dreams. We don't know what they mean." And no one around here can interpret. Joseph basically told them, "Look, God gives interpretations, not people. Tell me, and he might tell me what to do, what they mean." So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Joseph, and said to him, "See, in my dream a vine was before me, and in the vine were 3 branches. And it was as though it budded. Its blossoms shot forth, and its clusters brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and pressed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." And Joseph said to him, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh is going to lift up your head and restore you to your place, and you shall put Pharaoh's cup in his hand according to the former ruling where you were his cupbearer. But remember me when it is well with you, and please show loving commitment to me, and mention me to Pharaoh, and get me out of this house. For truly I was stolen away from the land of the Hebrews, and also I have done naught that I should be put into the dungeon." And the chief cupbearer saw that the interpretation was good. And he said to Joseph, "I also was in my dream, and saw 3 white baskets were on my head. And the uppermost basket, all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, and the birds ate them out of the basket on my head." And Joseph answered and said, "This is the interpretation of it. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days Pharaoh is going to lift up your head from you and hang you from on a tree. And the birds shall eat your flesh from you. And on the 3rd day, Pharaoh's birthday, it came to be that he made a feast for all his servants, and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his post of cupbearer again, And he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. And the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. Sorry, my throat tends to get a little dry reading to you guys. Alright, Genesis 41. And it came to be at the end of 2 years' time that Pharaoh had a dream, and saw him standing by the river, and saw 7 cows coming out of the river, beautiful looking and fat. And they fed among the reeds. Then saw 7 other cows coming up after them, out of the river, ugly and lean of flesh, and stood by the other cows on the bank of the river. And the ugly and lean of flesh cows ate up the 7 beautiful looking and fat cows, and Pharaoh awoke. And he slept and dreamed a second dream, or dreamed a second time, and saw 7 heads of grain coming up on one stalk, plump and good, and saw 7 lean heads scorched by the east wind coming up after them. The east wind in Egypt is actually a very dry wind because it's coming across the desert. So there's absolutely no moisture to it, and it would actually be very efficient at dehydrating food. So the east wind, whenever the east wind blows in Egypt, it's thought bad things are coming because, well, it dries everything out. Usually sandstorms come with it. And the 7 lean heads swallowed the 7 plump and complete heads. Then Pharaoh awoke and saw it was a dream. And it came to be in the morning that his spirit was moved. And he sent and called for all the magicians of Mitzrayim and all its wise men. And Pharaoh related to them his dreams, but there was no one who could interpret them for Pharaoh. Then the chief cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, saying, I remember my crimes this day. And Pharaoh was wroth with his servant and put him in confinement in the house of the captain of the guard, both me and the chief baker. Each one of us dreamed in a dream one night, he and I. Each of us dreamed according to the interpretation of his own dream. And there was with us a Hebrew youth, a servant of the captain of the guard, and we related to him, and he interpreted our dreams for us. Each man he interpreted according to his own dream. And it came to be, as he interpreted for us, so it came to be. He restored me to my office, and he hanged him. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they hurriedly brought him out of the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his garments and came to Pharaoh. That'd be like you or I going to getting a call, and the Secret Service bring us to the White House. I would definitely clean myself up, especially if I was sitting in prison. I'd at least trim my beard, brush my hair out. I'd make myself presentable. We would definitely get our clothes changed so that we're in fitting clothing for going to the highest office in the land. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I have dreamed a dream, and there was no one to interpret it. Now, I myself have heard it said that you understand a dream to interpret it. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, It is not in me. Let Elohim answer Pharaoh in peace. Basically, it's not me, it's God. God tells me what it means. That's all I can say about it. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, See, in my dream I stood on the bank of the river, and saw 7 cows coming up out of the river, beautiful, looking fat, and they fed among the reeds. Then I saw 7 other cows coming up after them, poor and very ugly, and lean of flesh. Such ugliness I have never seen in all the land of Mitzrayim. And the lean of flesh and ugly cows ate up the first 7, the fat cows. Yet when they had eaten them, no one would have known that they had eaten them, for they were as ugly as at the beginning. Then I awoke. Also I looked in my dream and saw 7 heads coming up on one stalk, complete and good. Then I saw 7 heads, withered, lean, scorched by the east wind, coming up after them. And the lean heads swallowed the 7 good heads. And I spoke to the magicians, but there was no one who could explain it to me. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, The dream of Pharaoh is one. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads are 7 years. It is one dream. And the 7 lean and ugly cows, which came up after them, are 7 years, and the 7 empty heads, scorched by the east wind, are 7 years of scarcity of food. This is the word which I spoke to Pharaoh. Elohim has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. Now, the 2 separate dreams are kind of important, because later in the Bible it says, as a thing is to be established by the word of 2 or 3 witnesses. So God is giving him 2 dreams. So Pharaoh is 2 witnesses in one. He is teaching him, showing him, look, this is what's coming. Pay attention. See, 7 years of great plenty are coming in the land of Mitzrayim, but after them 7 years of scarcity of food shall arise, and all the plenty be forgotten in the land of Mitzrayim, and the scarcity of food shall destroy the land. And the plenty shall not be remembered in the land because of the scarcity of food following, for it is very severe. And the dream was repeated to Pharaoh twice, because the word is established by Elohim, and Elohim is hastening to do it. And now, let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man to set him over the land of Mitzrayim. Let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint overseers over the land to take up 1/5 of the land of Mitzrayim in the 7 years of plenty. And let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming, and store up grain under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep the food in the cities. And the food shall be for a store for the land for the 7 years of scarcity of food, which shall be in the land of Mitzrayim, and do not let the land be cut off by the scarcity of food. And the word was good in the eyes of Pharaoh, and in the eyes of all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Could we find another like him, a man in whom the spirit of Elohim is the spirit of Elohim?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since Elohim has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. Be over my house, you yourself, and at your mouth all my people shall kiss. Only in the throne am I greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Mitzrayim." And Pharaoh took his signal ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And he dressed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. And he had him ride in the second chariot which he had. And they cried out before him, "Bow the knee," and set him over all the land of Mitzrayim. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without a word from you, let no man lift his hand or foot in all the land of Mitzrayim." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphath-Paneah, and gave him as a wife Asenath, the daughter of Padariah, priest of On. And Joseph went out over all the land of Mitzrayim. Some scholars actually believe that Joseph had another name in Egypt. Imhotep. Now, Zaphath-Paneah could be just the Hebrew version of Imhotep. In fact, there are huge plaques, huge stone monuments that were carved by various priests of the land, asking Pharaoh to give back the land that they were promised to be kept to them by Imhotep. And according to Egyptian history, Imhotep was actually the most powerful of the royal advisors, and he also taught them how to build pyramids. Joseph was not a dummy. It is very likely that if he was Imhotep, Joseph would have known how to build great structures such as the pyramids. And that would have honestly been something good for the people to be doing during the famine. Keep them busy. Let's continue on, though. Now Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout the land of Mitzrayim. And in the 7 years of plenty, the ground brought forth generously. And he gathered all the food of the 7 years which were in the land of Mitzrayim, and laid up the food in the cities. He laid up in every city the food of the fields which surrounded them. They actually have found huge grain storage complexes throughout Egypt. I mean, massive storage facilities. Some estimates say they could hold 500 square feet worth of grain in each of these buildings. Some have it up as much as 1,000. That's a lot of grain, considering like 10 square feet of grain is close to 5 tons, give or take. That's a huge amount of grain. And the farmers would not have just given up all of their grain. They would have eaten quite a bit, but farmers have always been pretty practical. They would have kept a lot of their excess for themselves. They wouldn't have just feasted the whole 7 years of plenty. So there was so much grain that it's almost unfathomable for us to even consider. I mean, one of these grain complexes would be the equivalent of one of our medium-sized silos. If you ever drive through farm country, you'll see silos every so often. One of the medium-sized silos would be about the size of one of these complexes, and there were 2 and 3 in each city. That is a massive amount of food. We don't know this, how much that actually looks nowadays, because we're not used to having stored food, because we've gotten used to this just-in-time delivery system. I mean, you go to a grocery store, they don't have anything in back. They have only what they need for 2 to 3 days. They have to get a truck every couple days in order to keep the shelves stocked. Thus Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea until he ceased counting, for it was without number. And to Joseph were born 2 sons before the years of scarcity of food came. From Asenath, the daughter of the priest of On, bore him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for Elohim has made me forget all my toil and all my father's house. And the name of the second he called Ephraim, for Elohim has caused me to be fruitful in the land of my affliction. And the 7 years of plenty, which were in the land of Mitzrayim, came to an end. And the 7 years of scarcity of food began to come, as Joseph had said. And the scarcity of food was in all the land, but in the land of Mitzrayim there was bread. But when all the land of Mitzrayim hungered, and the people cried to Pharaoh for bread, Pharaoh said to the Mitzrayites, "Go to Joseph, do whatever he says to you." And the scarcity of food was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Mitzrayites, and the scarcity of food was severe in the land of Mitzrayim. And all the earth came to Joseph in Mitzrayim to buy grain, because the scarcity of food was severe in all the earth. See, this shows that God has plans for everything. God used the evil of Joseph's brothers to save the world, so that not everyone would starve to death. He put Joseph in a position of power by allowing Potiphar's wife to accuse him of rape and get him put into prison. And then God elevated Joseph in prison, so that when the cupbearer came in, Joseph could interpret his dream. And then when Pharaoh got these dreams, the cupbearer would remember, and then they bring Joseph to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh elevate Joseph to protect the world. If you're going through a hard time in life, just remember, God uses evil for good. You may think it's a bad time. You lost your job. Your wife left you. Well, honestly, God takes you out of a position and puts you in a better one. Look what he did to Joseph. He put Joseph into slavery through the hands of his brothers, just to put him into power in Egypt so that they could raise enough food to feed the world. Yes, you may have lost your job. That sucks. But God's going to get you something better. Maybe it's less stress. Maybe it's the same amount of stress, but better pay. God is not going to take you out of one job unless he's going to put you into another one. God does not take and leave you without. God will take from you what he feels is unnecessary for you, and then he will put you into a place which will be better for you, because he knows more than we do. It's often been said, and I quite agree, God gives us the exact answer we would want to our prayers, if only we knew everything God knows. When you're having a hard time, just remember that. Sometimes it's hard to remember things like that. I know for a fact it's very hard sometimes, but just remember, God does have a plan. And he's in the habit of dragging us along, kicking and screaming. But we're going to leave off here today for now. We'll pick back up next time. I want to thank you all for joining me. I want to thank you all for reading along. And as always, good luck and God bless.